Gibraltar may be tiny, but it has just become the stage for one of the most telling post-Brexit experiments yet. In 2016, 96% of Gibraltarians voted to remain in the European Union, knowing their economy and daily life depended on an open border with Spain. With thousands of workers crossing daily, Brexit meant chaos, and it delivered. But in June 2025, Gibraltar struck a deal. Spanish officers now conduct Schengen checks at its airport and port, while the hard border vanishes. The UK keeps sovereignty, yet Spain gains a role at the gates. Could this fragile balance foreshadow Britain's own post-Brexit path? Not everyone in the United Kingdom wanted to leave the European Union. 48% voted to remain, but they were edged out by the 52% majority in favour of Brexit. That's just democracy for you. Rough and sometimes imperfect. Yet, Gibraltar exemplifies just how messy the aftermath can be. Here's a map illustrating how different regions in the UK voted in 2016. Sourced by data from the Electoral Commission, you'll see here at the bottom how Gibraltar was also yellow. The fact of the matter is that every day, roughly 15,000 people cross the land border from Spain into Gibraltar to make a living. For them, Brexit was an existential challenge, not a political trophy. But now, with its alignment to the Schengen area, Gibraltar is weaving its own path forward. Under the new agreement, travellers arriving at Gibraltar's airport and port will undergo Eurostar-style dual passport checks by both British and Spanish officers while the land border becomes seamless. In practice, this means Gibraltar effectively forms part of the Schengen zone. But make no mistake, Gibraltar is not a part of the EU. Still, nothing changes regarding political control or military autonomy. The UK preserves its sovereignty over Gibraltar, yet somehow the arrangement shifts the lens. Daily life, economic survival, and freedom of movement are now being prioritized over ideological purity. As The Guardian notes, it is a deal with something for everyone. Cross-border workers, tourists, and businesses will benefit from smoother movement and reduced friction. But there's more. The deal also addresses long-standing fiscal tensions. Gibraltar has agreed to implement a minimum 15% transaction tax on goods, rising to parity with the lowest EU rate over 3 years to align more closely with EU standards and prevent unfair competition. To break it down, it boosts the ROC's economy, easing UK-EU and UK-Spain relations, and marks a fresh cooperative chapter in post-Brexit dynamics. But what exactly does this mean for Gibraltar's autonomy? On paper, London's authority remains intact. In practice, however, the territory is making decisions that prioritize its own economic resilience, diverging from Westminster's path. Some in the UK may frame Spain's role in Gibraltar's borders as a symbolic concession, while others view it as overdue realism, an acknowledgement that geography and economics can't simply be voted away. Gibraltar's choice to align with Schengen reflects not defiance, but adaptation, a strategy to safeguard its people and economy in a world reshaped by Brexit. Spain gains a degree of oversight at Gibraltar's entry points. The EU can claim success in extending Schengen's reach, and the UK can assure Gibraltarians that their unique position has been secured. For Gibraltar itself, the deal signs a strong assertion of agency. Yet, the bigger question remains, what exactly is inside this deal that allows Gibraltar to step into Schengen's open door without formally stepping back into the EU? In 2019, an article titled "The Economic Effects of Brexit in the Campo de Gibraltar" laid out the projected economic future of the Campo de Gibraltar under different Brexit outcomes. It contrasts an optimistic soft Brexit scenario with a harsher no-deal one, both measured against a world where the UK never left the EU. The graph makes it clear. Every scenario shows losses in GDP, imports, and jobs, with the no-deal case hitting the region the hardest. On June 11, 2025, the United Kingdom, Spain, Gibraltar, and the European Commission reached an agreement that reshaped Gibraltar's relationship with Europe. It was described as a historic milestone by EU officials and a practical reset by commentators in the UK and Spain. At its core, the deal offers Gibraltar the benefits of Schengen access without forcing it to rejoin the European Union. The arrangement reflects compromise, pragmatism, and a recognition of Gibraltar's unique geography and economic dependence on cross-border movement. One of the most practical elements of the deal involves border checks. Anyone who has travelled on the Eurostar between London and Paris will be familiar with the model being adopted. Gibraltar's airport and port will have juxtaposed controls, meaning travellers are checked twice, once by Gibraltar's own authorities and then by Spanish officers acting on behalf of Schengen. This system ensures that Gibraltar remains under British sovereignty while simultaneously opening its doors to Schengen countries. At the same time, the infamous land border, known locally as La Veria, will disappear in early 2026. This means the daily commute for the roughly 15,000 cross-border workers will no longer be subject to the delays and uncertainties that plagued them after Brexit. The local economy relies heavily on its ability to connect seamlessly with the surrounding Spanish region of Campo de Gibraltar. Without smooth movement, the cost to businesses, tourism, and government budgets could have been devastating. Reports suggested that if the border had hardened after Brexit, the UK Treasury might have needed to provide subsidies just to keep Gibraltar functioning at its current level. The Schengen arrangement avoids that scenario and secures a much more sustainable future for both workers and employers. Critically, this deal does not alter sovereignty. The UK government was clear in its statement that Gibraltar remains British and that all defence matters remain firmly under London's control. Political authority continues to lie with Gibraltar's government under the UK umbrella, and the presence of Spanish officials at the airport and port is limited strictly to Schengen checks. Far from ceding ground, London frames the arrangement as strengthening Gibraltar's position by ensuring stability while avoiding economic isolation. Alongside mobility, the agreement takes on the thorny issue of taxation. Gibraltar has long been accused by critics in Spain and the EU of acting as a low-tax hub. To address these concerns, Gibraltar agreed to introduce a minimum 15% taxation tax, which will gradually rise to match the lowest EU rate of indirect taxation. Currently, that benchmark is set by Luxembourg at 17%. This move not only reduces the incentive for smuggling and unfair price competition, but also signals Gibraltar's willingness to play by European rules while maintaining its autonomy in other areas. From a legal standpoint, this arrangement is not permanent, but is set up as a 4-year pilot project. The framework allows all parties to reassess how well the model is functioning and make adjustments. This flexibility is crucial because it acknowledges that circumstances may change, whether in relation to trade flows, cross-border policing, or broader UK-EU relations. During this period, Gibraltar will also work on customs cooperation to make sure that goods can move with minimal friction, reducing the risk of bottlenecks in supply chains. The deal also opens space for cooperation on social security, environmental standards, and recognition of documentation, giving it a much broader scope than just border management. In the end, the Schengen deal is less about surrendering control and more about adapting to reality. Gibraltar gains smoother borders and economic security, while the UK safeguards its sovereignty. Yet, the presence of Spanish officers conducting Schengen checks raises an uncomfortable question. If Gibraltar stays British in name and governance, who really calls the shots at its borders? The dreaded hard border at La Veria would be dismantled, and cross-border workers will finally be spared from the long lines and unpredictable checks. Instead, the border would effectively be moved away from the fence and placed inside Gibraltar itself.
The kids who come to work and after working have to endure a queue. For them, agreements are better, allowing them to enter and leave with more freedom.
But this raises the obvious question. If the gates are gone, who is really in charge of Gibraltar's borders now? Spain will now play a central role in handling visas, residency permits, and even asylum applications for people connected to Gibraltar. That is a significant change. Previously, these were matters left for Gibraltar's own systems under the UK umbrella. Now, this doesn't mean Spain has sovereignty, but it does mean Spanish authorities are, in effect, the gatekeepers. British nationals could soon find themselves turned away at Gibraltar's Schengen checkpoints by Spanish officers, according to The Sun. So what does this actually mean for the people who live and work around Gibraltar? Every day, workers cross from the Campo de Gibraltar region in Spain into the Rock. These are waiters, office workers, teachers, and professionals whose lives straddle both sides of the border. For them, the deal is mostly a relief. Long queues that could stretch for hours will soon be gone. Goods will move more freely, tourism will benefit, and the local economy will be steadier. From this perspective, Spain's new role feels less like an intrusion and more like a safeguard to keep life running smoothly. But politically, optics are harder to ignore. Britain wants to preserve sovereignty and reassure Gibraltarians that nothing fundamental has changed. Spain wants to show it has influence at the frontier, gaining a practical role in areas like visas and asylum. The EU wants Schengen's integrity maintained, with Spain acting as its representative, and Gibraltar itself simply wants stability, mobility, and a functioning economy. All four aims are technically compatible, but they exist in constant tension. So, who really controls Gibraltar's borders now? The answer isn't simple. Legally, the UK remains sovereign, and Gibraltar governs itself as it always has. Politically, Spain hasn't gained a single inch of territory or official claim. But practically, Spain is at the gates, checking passports, processing permits, and shaping who can cross into Europe. What's happening in Gibraltar today may seem like a local issue, but it carries lessons far beyond the rock itself. The territory's political and economic adjustments offer a glimpse into how the UK and EU might navigate their relationship in the years ahead. First, let's remember where Gibraltar stood at the start of this journey. Once a part of the European Union by default, Gibraltar voted overwhelmingly to remain, with nearly 96% of its population. Yet, when the UK left the EU in 2020, Gibraltar went along for the ride. Fast forward to June 11, 2025, a moment described by the Gibraltar Chronicle as one of progress, clarity, and optimism. In Brussels, UK, EU, Spanish, and Gibraltar leaders struck a landmark deal to smooth border movement, secure economic ties, and reassert identity, all the while maintaining UK sovereignty. Gibraltar's Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo, was adamant, the deal does not in any way affect our British sovereignty. Let's talk about what that means. On the one hand, Gibraltar remains firmly British, its internal self-government continues, UK defence stations remain intact, and any question of sovereignty will only be addressed with Gibraltarian consent. But the practical application of border control has shifted. Travellers now go through both Gibraltar and Spanish or Schengen checks, effectively integrating Gibraltar into a Schengen-style system. And physical border barriers, notably La Verja, are set to come down around early 2026. Does this feel like a setback of sovereignty? Not necessarily. Think of it more like a creative workaround that keeps formal control while embracing cooperation. Picture it like this: GBP stays the currency. Courts remain British, but the checkpoint officer next to yours wears a Spanish uniform. Sovereignty is intact, but with a shared hand on daily operations. From a bigger perspective, isn't that how a post-Brexit UK might need to function? There's economic logic here too. Gibraltar's economy runs on services, finance, tourism, online betting, and shipping. It's a high-wage but small-scale economy depending heavily on open borders. Without agreement, cross-border workers and businesses would face chaos. With it, they have certainty. But the agreement isn't a permanent solution. It's structured as a provisional framework, open for review and adjustment. That mirrors a broader lesson. Long-term relationships may benefit more from evolving arrangements than from rigid blueprints. Of course, critics worry that the new Schengen-like controls chip away at Gibraltar's identity as a separate jurisdiction. Having Spanish or EU officials at your frontier duties might send the wrong message, even if sovereignty is still legally British. And not every post-Brexit situation can be solved with a mini Gibraltar-style deal, but Gibraltar's path reveals how adaptability and symbolism can coexist in diplomacy. So, is Gibraltar a crystal ball for the UK post-Brexit? Well, it certainly feels like one. Gibraltar's Schengen deal proves that sovereignty and practicality can live side by side, even if the balance is delicate. The territory stays British in law and identity, but Spanish officers now help decide who passes through its gates. For locals, it means smoother travel and economic security. For Spain and the EU, it signals influence. And for Britain, it offers a preview of a post-Brexit future built on compromise.